we'll see how that plays out. But speaking of OpenAI, there was another big announcement this week. It was a busy week, I guess. And that is that OpenAI finally announced what they are calling Operator, which is, and I've actually forgotten Anthropic's version, but it is using your browser, right? So
Oh, apparently
it's
Claude calls it computer use. That's
that's why
why
I
you
can't
can't
remember it because
remember
it's
it. It was
a
just
horrible name.
a
Yeah. So obviously in development too, it's in a preview, but it takes over your computer using your browser to do things. Operator does not do that. Operator opens up a virtual browser session. And Casey Newton, who I'm a big fan of, and his thing he actually ponied up to $200, didn't take a freebie, ponied up to $200, signed up himself so that he could actually test this out. And he found that that virtual browser created lots of issues because what that meant is that virtual browser was just a plain vanilla browser, had no context, had no sense of your logins or your preferences or anything. And that actually made it extremely hard for operator to do even simple tasks because it literally didn't know anything about what they're doing. This is something that is very near and dear to my heart because we've been talking a lot about agentic AI. In fact, we'll talk about Microsoft in a second here. And the trick with agentic AI is context. If you lack context, agentic AI is, in my opinion, dangerous. And I think that's what this is, in my opinion, a fairly disappointing first run from OpenAI because of that. And I'm not minimizing it. It's a very thorny issue. It's a hard problem to solve, particularly at a consumer level. But the initial reviews that I've read, including the one by Casey Newton, basically point to there is a whole lot of rough edges on this that, things take longer to do, which is the opposite of the point of it. So I'm curious what your take was, if you had any experience, if you signed up for it or anything.
So I have played with it, and honestly, I couldn't get it to do much. So I think the challenge both with OpenAI operator and Anthropic computer
Sure.
use, it provides an agentic way to work with keystrokes and mouse clicks, and that's fine. But the bigger challenge is you're trying to get a computer to think a little bit more like a person from a UX perspective, which is really not something that we have tried up to this point. And I think we're missing some sort of middleware layer for the agent to really figure out how to use something like a human. And frankly, some of these UX capabilities that we're supposed to appreciate as web browsers ourselves as human beings, aren't that great. And I think that's part of what these agents are showing, that what we actually do when we're using computers is often quite inefficient and based on 30, 40, 50-year-old paradigms rather than
Well,
something like,
yeah, it is. I mean, I think part of the challenge, we've talked about this a lot, that, one of the challenges with any form of technology is the very first modality is to simply replicate the way humans already do something and to then automate or digitize that process. And it should be followed by a second stage of transformation, which is the reimagining of that process to align to take most advantage of the technology. But what we see in many cases is that second stage never occurs. And so we end up with these very clunky interfaces and clunky processes because we simply did that first step and did only the incremental innovation or improvements after that. And so I think in part that's part of the issue. Now, if you remember, we talked a little bit about the CEO of Box, Aaron Levine, who had a post on LinkedIn talking about why computer use was so important. And for me, it was one of these light bulb moments of saying, oh, okay, I get that, because in a consumer type environment where I have the entire sort of known universe, it's extremely difficult, in fact, probably impractical, to build connectivity to everything in a digitized digital fashion. And so these sorts of solutions are attempting to close that gap. But as you pointed out, it's actually extremely hard to do because the system lacks that context, doesn't have that way of interacting on a digital intelligent sort of layer. And so therefore it's having to drop into our persona, which is like this horribly inefficient thing. And so it does cause, for me, it causes me to question. Well, it does two things. It tells me as we're going to talk about here in a second with Microsoft, the most powerful first steps around agentic AI are going to be in closed loop environments where we can control the interface, control the environment. And secondly, it does make me wonder, are we going to be able to get the sort of consumer where I don't have those controls, agentic solutions? Are they ever going to work? Or are they only going to work when we start reimagining how everything works to begin with?
Yeah, I think we'll eventually start figuring it out, but we need to have this additional stage where we are making it easier for agents and for generative AI to identify things like paragraphs on open text and open documents. Whatever logic is being used needs to become more efficient for that to happen, because that's what we do as human beings. When we read through a web page, we are effectively, among other things, doing, call it 50 to 100 different prompts into our brain and immediately getting results. Right now that takes a gallon of water and who knows how much electricity to do with an LLM, and it needs to be a little bit more effective than that to move forward. So hopefully
Yeah, well,
we get there. Yeah.
I do wonder. I think I agree with you that over the long haul we're going to figure it out. But it's why I get so frustrated when people talk about us being so close to AGI, right? Artificial general intelligence, because my definition of artificial general intelligence of AGI is that the system can effectively perform these functions flawlessly because it is able to think just like we do, but do it at light speed. And that's the issue, is that the human brain is incredibly capable of intuiting, taking an interface that is never seen before and figuring it out, right? And clicking around and doing some trial and error and doing all these things that none of these systems can even come close to touching right now. And so I look at this and, people are saying, oh, we're within a year or two of AGI, and, maybe we're going to see exponential transformation here. But right now I look and go, no, we are so far from it.
Right.
Maybe in very narrow bounds we can get there, but not at this broad where I can drop the AI into anything. So I think it will be interesting. I, as always, applaud all of these companies for being willing to put this stuff out there in very early stages and let people like us, hack it at it and criticize them when they're doing it's amazing technology. But clearly, Operator has a long way to go.
Mm-hmm.